Hi and welcome to the Bible Standard. Prepare now to embark on a riveting journey through history, prophecy and the modern day saga of Israel in this compelling continuation of a thought-provoking study. In part 2 of how a terrorist, a temple and a Texas red cow started a war, we dive into the extraordinary transformation of a persecuted people into a formidable nation, now wielding the 15th most powerful military on earth. From the ashes of the Holocaust to the establishment of a resilient Jewish state, this narrative weaves together the threads of divine prophecy and current events as foretold in the ancient scriptures. Explore how Israel's very existence stands as a testament to God's will, with its people declared as His witnesses in Isaiah 43 verses 10 to 11, and how the promise to Abraham that those who bless Israel will be blessed and those who curse it will be cursed continues to shape global dynamics, and reflect on the stark contrast between Israel's fierce resolve to protect its citizens and the chilling ideology of groups like Hamas, who glorify martyrdom over life. With gripping insights into the 1947 UN partition of Palestine, the ensuing wars and the ongoing struggles in Gaza, this talk unveils the divine master plan unfolding before our eyes. They challenge us to see the Middle East not just through the lens of politics, but through the unyielding promises of God. Join us as we unravel the profound connection between past, present and prophecy, and discover why Israel's story is one of resilience, destiny and unshakable purpose.
Hello and welcome back to part 2 of our talk on how a terrorist, a temple and a Texan red cow started a war. So we finished our last talk, our first talk, at the end of the Nazi persecution of the Jews, and a flag illustrating the power and presence of the nation of Israel, which was the outcome of Hitler's attempt to destroy the Jews once and for all. And what he achieved doing was to develop a Jewish state, as a state that grew over the following 80 years to be the 15th most powerful military force on the planet, and certainly the number one military force in its theatre in the Middle East. But we didn't just get there overnight, and we wish to now look at the steps that led up to the current state of Israel today. But as we do so, we want to carry with us the scriptures, because this talk and Christadelphians are not about the politics of the Middle East or the world, or even Israel for that matter. What we're about is the degree to which the current events in the world today reflect the will of God as predicted in the scriptures of truth, and foretell how all this is going to end in some considerable detail and how the players will all add up. So let's just reflect on this fact firstly, that Israel has a special place to play in the kingdoms of men, because we're told in Isaiah chapter 43 verses 10 to 11, "Ye are my witnesses, saith the Lord, and my servant whom I have chosen, that I am He." So the existence of God is demonstrated in many ways, but in particular in the presence of the Jewish people. Now, many claim to have supplanted Israel in the place as witnesses to God's existence, and many may claim to witness to the truth of God, and probably we too would say we witness to the reality of God. But God said to the Jewish people, and the Jewish people primarily, "You are my witnesses, saith the Lord, that I am He." And then the quote that's thrown around quite a lot these days, especially by evangelical Christians and by the ambassador to Israel, Mr. Huckabee, "I will bless them that bless thee, I will curse him that curseth thee, and in thee shall all families of the earth be blessed." A promise made to Abraham, the father of the Jewish people. And so that brings us to where we are now. And what we have now is a remarkable nation. And the picture you see in front of you there of women about to go into the Nazi concentration camp workhouse compares in stark contrast to the daughters of these women, the great-great-granddaughters, if you like, whatever, who are there today. They will never be so treated again. And so it is, in fact, that in Israel, 1 in 5 Israeli fighters is now female. There was an interesting story about one of them, Major M. They can't give her real name. She has a day job in marketing. She's a wife with several children. And she got an order to come to the Air Force base because she was about to fly missions into Iran to destabilize the nuclear plant that they were so successfully building. Then she went home again and turned up the next day in the kitchen in the home with her children and family. This is a characteristic of 70 female pilots and navigators. Major M, in fact, was a navigator and weapons operator on one of the jets you can see in the picture there. Now, it's not our place to glorify these things for the sake of war, but rather to acknowledge the presence of such people as this, even though they, in many cases, don't respect God, don't believe in God even, believe in the power of their own might. Nevertheless, it doesn't detract from the fact that their very presence and the role they play is in accordance with the divine master plan for mankind. And so we remind ourselves of the words of the prophecy of Jeremiah. Thus saith the Lord, which giveth the sun for a light by day, and the ordinance of the moon and stars for a light by night, which divideth the sea when the waves thereof roar. Yahweh of hosts is his name. If those ordinances depart from before me, saith the Lord, then the seed of Israel also shall cease from being a nation before me. And every time you go down to the sea, on a quiet day when the waves are just lapping up, running up the beach and rolling back, they're saying, Israel will return. Israel will return. Israel will return. And so they did. After 2,000 years, they returned and they became a nation. That return was inevitable. And another verse that reinforces this, and say unto them, thus saith the Lord God, behold, I will take the children of Israel from among the nations, whither they be gone, will gather them on every side and bring them into their own land, and I will make them one nation in the land upon the mountains of Israel. And one king shall be king over them all, and they shall be no more two kingdoms, neither shall they be divided into two kingdoms any more at all. And of course, the mountains of Israel are in fact what's called today the West Bank, which interestingly enough, America has recently acknowledged that from henceforth they're not going to refer to the West Bank as the West Bank. They're going to call the place Judah and Samaria. Now, of course, there's a bit of controversy around who should be running that area. It's part of the original allocation to the Arabs. Nevertheless, the day is going to come when the whole land is going to be consolidated under Israel. But of course, it wasn't easy, was it? When the British turned their backs on the refugees as they poured into Palestine after the Second World War, Britain, who had backed the whole idea of Israel becoming a nation and backed the idea of Palestine as a homeland for the Jews, woke up one day to realise where their oil came from. And when it came to the vote on whether Palestine should become a homeland for the Jews, they abstained, which is a bit sad, isn't it, really, having initiated the whole thing. But it left a whole bunch of Jews stranded on the water and created quite a problem. And it's interesting. You have a passage to this effect. Behold, I will bring them from the north country and gather them from the coasts of the earth. I will with them the blind and the lame and the women with child and her that travaileth with child together, a great company, and they shall return. And we find that, and it continues in Jeremiah 31, They shall come with weeping and with supplication. I will lead them. I will cause them to walk by the rivers of waters in a straight way, wherein they shall not stumble, for I am the father of Israel, and Ephraim is my firstborn. Hear the word of the Lord, O you nations, and declare it in the isles afar off, and say, he that scattered Israel will gather them and keep them, as a shepherd does his flock. And so it was on the 29th of November 1947, the United Nations General Assembly voted for the petition of Palestine, and the resolution 181 was adopted by a vote of 33-13. The Arabs rejected the petition plan, and it was not confined to a political act. They were going to actually start a war over it, and they launched a full-scale terrorist campaign against their Jewish neighbours. And as I mentioned before, a bunch of countries abstained from that vote, among them United Kingdom. And so this was the beginning of the reign of the terrorists in the life of the average Jew. And you would think after all those centuries of persecution, all down through time that we've considered in our first session, to the Holocaust and the terrible suffering, surely enough is enough. I mean, why did they even want to go back? Why didn't they leave and go back into whichever country would accept them? But the Jew that now stood in Palestine changed his name, and he changed his name to Israel. And he said, we are Israelis now. We are different now. You throw a bomb at us, we'll throw two back. You terrify our people, we'll terrify yours. And wherever there in the world there is persecution of Jews, Israelis will be there to help them. That's the monumental change that Hitler achieved in this cursed and despised people. And so it was on the 14th of May 1948 that Israel declared its independence. David Ben-Gurion was the first prime minister. Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon, and Iraq declared war simultaneously. And so began the training. Women training in 1948, women training in 2018. But so much has changed. This was Palestine under the British mandate. And that's another story in itself, where they drove out the Turkish Empire. And as you can see there, various countries took a bite out of things. France took Syria, and Britain took Palestine as it's there defined. And then that was then partitioned according to the petition laid out in the resolution of the United Nations. And that's what you can see there on the map is the Arab section and the Jewish state. Arabs, 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 and Arabs. Not a heck of a lot for the Jews, really, when you look at it. And down here is pretty barren. But, of course, they've turned the wilderness into fertile land and blossoms as the rose, as the scripture predicted. But anyway, the result of this establishment of Israel as a nation, as we said, caused its neighbours to invade. And so it was. And we're not going to go into any detail on this, simply to show the massive attack that took place from Egypt, from Jordan, from Syria, from Saudi Arabia. Everyone was attacking Israel. Now, the Israelis got a lot of support at this time, and the Arabs have a way, and I say this with respect, the Arabs have a way of overstating their ability. You might remember when America was at war with Iraq, and Saddam Hussein boasted that this was going to be the mother of all wars, and America would be gobbled up and destroyed, and they'll be sorry they were born, and all that kind of stuff. And America just went splat. And that was the end of it. And the people of Iraq hung Saddam Hussein. And you see a similar kind of hubris with the Ayatollah in Iran. He came out. In fact, the world was thinking if Israel attacks Iran, it's going to be a third world war. It's going to be absolute catastrophe because Iran has all this weaponry. And again, Israel attacked, destroyed the nuclear reactor, or most of it. wiped out 250 of the upper echelons of the army of the Ayatollah, and they threw rockets at each other for 12 days and then stopped. And of course, the fact of the matter was it was very expensive for both parties, and the Ayatollah was running out of firepower and support. And then, of course, America topped it off by sending a stealth bomber across there to wipe out the rest of the nuclear reactor. Now, I don't say that with any joy or at all, because innocent people suffered because of the tyrannical leaders of all countries that go to war these days. But I just say the hubris of the Arabs is their disadvantage. Hamas has said similar things. And so it was with this first war. Israel really believed that the Arabs could overrun them. So they went out and they built up their armory, and they got tremendous help from America, and they fought like their survival depended on it, and they conquered and they won. And as a result of that, all these people here, I won't go through it in detail, all became displaced. Somewhere around 500,000 were displaced and still in the land. And many of them ended up in Gaza as well as in the West Bank. But you can see the numbers that were dispersed among the local area. And what a terrible tragedy, if you think about that, was, because this was the beginning of the refugee status of Palestinians within their own land. And the United Nations was then funding them and funded them from that, from 1948 until this present time. But what a terrible waste of life that was. And we'll have a little reflection on that in just a second. But we're reminded of the scriptures again when the scripture says, "For I am with thee, saith the Lord, to save thee. Though I make a full end of all nations whither I have scattered thee, yet will I not make a full end of thee. But I'll correct thee in measure, and I will not leave thee altogether unpunished." So it's not like God condones everything that Israel does and supports everything that Israel does. They are in ignorance, and they have rejected God, and they have a day of reckoning that must come. But before that can come, they must be fully established and able to defend themselves. And so God is saying, not going to make a full end of you, but you're not going to get away unpunished for your contribution to things that you're responsible for. The interesting quote, one of my favourite prime ministers was Golda Meir. She's just a remarkable woman in so many ways, and we can have time to talk about it particularly. But she did say this, and I think it's a really powerful quote, or two quotes actually. Down the bottom of the slide there, slightly off the slide, "Peace will come when the Arabs will love their children more than they hate us." And it's a great tragedy to see in the Middle East today the way in which the Palestinians grow their children to be martyrs, grow their children to sacrifice themselves for the cause of the jihadists. But the best quote is, "If we have to choose between being dead and pitied and being alive with a bad image, we'd rather be alive and have a bad image." And can't you see that out working today? Benjamin Netanyahu can live with a bad image for the sake of being alive and keeping his people alive. No one's going to step in and protect Israel from the Palestinians if Israel stops fighting. Palestinians stop fighting, nothing will happen. Israel stop fighting, they'll be annihilated. And my other favourite quote, if I can just share it, "Don't be humble, you're not that great." Love it. Okay, so then we come on to our terrorists. And the terrorists we're talking about, that is part of our title, is this man here, Yahya Sinwar. And the Palestinian terrorists have this quotation, "We love death more than you love life." And so their whole ethos is about self-sacrifice for the sake of the cause. And everybody is a martyr, which is why when you look at what's going on in Gaza and you know that there's 300 kilometres of tunnels riddling that whole land, that there are no bomb shelters for the people. And there are no bomb shelters because they're martyrs. And the more of them that give their life, And the more the United Nations worry about that and stress about the fact that all these people are dying, and of course we only ever have the Palestinian Health Department's records to go on, and as it's often asserted, somewhere between 70 and 90% of all the information that comes out of Gaza comes from Hamas. There's no independent source of information. But let me give you a little insight into the attitude of the typical Palestinian anti-Zionist terrorist supporter. And incidentally, if you go onto the internet and you look up the writings of Yahya Sinwar, on one of them I read, he talks about the various methods of terrorism, and he talks about the benefits of suicide bombers versus knife attacks in the street versus small groups attacking people, but resolves that the absolute best way of generating terror is the bus bomb, where you put a young person on a bus with his suicide vest and he blows up a whole bus. That gives you a maximum hit rate. And you mightn't be able to see it, you mightn't want to see it, but just down here are legs and shoes of one such terrorist. There's an example of an attitude. This is a lady who was an educated woman who edits a woman's magazine in Lebanon, Zahra Maladan. She's also a mother who undoubtedly loves her son. Now, this was written by a Harvard Law School staff writer back in 2008. She has ambitions for her son, but they're different from those of most mothers in the West. She wants her son to become a suicide bomber. Miss Maladan was quoted in the New York Times giving the following warning to her son: "If you're not going to follow the steps of the Islamic resistance martyrs, then I don't want you." Pretty chilling ambition for a son to hear. Now, fortunately for a son, and we don't know what happened to him, but fortunately, suicide bombing, you might have noticed, has gone out a little bit. Hamas has more relied on just sending hundreds and hundreds of rockets into Israel or sending people in with knives and guns to do what damage they can possibly do. There hasn't been so many suicide bombers as there used to be, fortunately. But again, another attitude. We're going to win because they love life and we love death. Each of us lives his days and nights hoping more than anything to be killed for the sake of Allah. Hassan Nasrallah. Now, Hassan Nasrallah was the leader of Hezbollah, and the Israelis obliged him with his desire to die for Allah. Then we have this chap down here, Sheikh Frez Mohammed, leader of the Global Islamic Youth Centre in Sydney, Australia, who preach, "We want to have children and offer them as soldiers defending Islam. Teach them this. There is nothing more beloved to me than wanting to die as a mujahid." That is to say, someone who struggles for Islam. Now, with that kind of attitude in the background and the firm conviction that the Palestinians have every right to every square inch of what they understand to be Palestine and are prepared to die for it, what chance do you have of having any kind of peaceful settlement when these people deny the right of Israel to exist? But not only that, in the recent rhetoric that you hear on university campuses of the Ivy League universities of America and the streets of London now, and more recently on the streets of the Sydney Harbour Bridge in Australia, you hear the words that wherever the Jews are, they have to be hunted down and killed. And it's undeniable. Oh, well, they're just overexcited. They wouldn't really do it. I wouldn't want to be a Jewish person, would you? When you look at the hatred that is spewing out of the mouths of people in all these major cities, they've never seen that before of any other members of a country that was unpopular with the rest of the world, like Russia invading Ukraine, or people related to the Saudis who are invading Yemen, or any other of the myriad of massacres that's going on in the world. The whole of Syria, for example, millions and millions of people murdered for the sake of that regime. no riots in the street. We've got Syrians living in our country. We've got Syrians contributing to our society. We've got Lebanese living in our society as well, who have had their own share, Christian Lebanese in particular. But we don't see any marches in the street, any waving of flags. No, if you want to get a real protest going, make sure there's a Jewish issue in there somewhere. That seems to bring the crowds out. One of the founding members of Hamas had this to say about the circumstances that are going on in the Middle East. 75% of the population of Gaza are refugees, and it's the UN's responsibility to protect them. This Abu Mazouk added, referencing the UN Relief Agency of Palestinian Refugees that operates across Gaza, the West Bank and other Middle East countries to provide basic services to Palestinian refugees from 1948 and their millions of descendants who are also regarded by the agency as refugees despite never having been displaced during their lifetime. Now, the point we want to note there is, as far as he is concerned, the people of Palestine are the responsibility of the United Nations. Now, Hamas was voted in as the government to take over from the previous regime that still exists in the West Bank, the Palestine Organization, or the Palestine Liberation Organization, or whatever it's called. Now I think it's just the Palestine Organization. So they were both voted out. Hamas was voted in. This is now the new government. And the new government says, well, you know, the people are not really our responsibility. That's the UN's responsibility because they're all refugees. So they wipe their hand at their people. Then they start firing over the space of 20 years, 20,000 rockets into Israel. And can I just say in relation to that, I did this little exercise that you might like to try it yourself. The distance between Gaza and Jerusalem is about 85 kilometres. If I take a line and do a radius out 85 kilometres, I hit the city of Wollongong. Now, I have a feeling that if the city of Wollongong woke up one day and decided they didn't like Sydney anymore and decided they would start firing rockets, I can't believe that the people of Sydney would allow that to go on for 20 years before they said, you know, I think we need to go down there and have a talk with these people. Maybe we need to take an army down there and put a stop to this once and for all, instead of just putting up our Iron Dome and deflecting all the missiles and every now and again fighting it through back. We need to stop this. We need to stop it once and for all. So maybe you like to do the exercise. Do a radius 85 kilometres. First of all, see how close that is to where you live. And when you realise that they have rockets that will go 150 kilometres without too much trouble at all, and then imagine 20,000 of them being rained down on you, it'll give you a little insight into why the Israelis got a little bit warm about this whole matter and decided it was time to do something about it. In separate interviews with the BBC and The Economist after October the 7th, which of course was the last straw as far as Israel was concerned, Mazouk refused to acknowledge that Hamas killed civilians. Now, one of the things you notice about Hamas, which seems to be not available for politicians to see in some countries, is that they don't always tell the truth. And so this man just looked at the BBC in the face and said, we didn't kill any civilians. Now, so 1,200 Israelis were killed, 250 were taken captive, about 300 were soldiers. The rest were civilians. If you go on, and I don't actually recommend this, but I can tell you, there is a site, one of the Jewish sites, where a CCTV camera has captured an Israeli running for his life and being shot by terrorists. He's not in a military uniform. He's not a soldier. He was an ordinary civilian, and they just hunted him down and shot him. And it's recorded there as he falls to the pavement with blood pouring out of his body. Multiply that by 1,200 times and mix in the rape, sadism, torture of men, women and children, young and old, without discrimination. And this man will tell you, no, we didn't kill any civilians during the attack. And as for the As for the music festival, well, that was a big mistake, you see, because the soldiers from Gaza, they probably thought that they were soldiers taking a rest, and therefore they were fair game. When asked why Hamas built 500 kilometres of tunnels but no shelters for civilians in Gaza, Mazouk said that the tunnels are built to protect Hamas fighters, while it's the responsibility of the United Nations to protect civilians. Now, I ask you, how can you possibly win when dealing with people like that? They just absolve themselves of any responsibility whatsoever. Israelis, on the other hand, just about every building in Israel has got a car park that acts as a bomb shelter, which they go and set up in until the bombs stop falling. What an incredible contrast in terms of caring for one's people. And remember, Hamas came into power as a government. We get the impression that they're kind of like a terrorist group operating in isolation within the country. No, they are the country. And the West likes to try and make this difference, but they are the country. They were voted in by the people of that country. And this is how they think about their people. And of course, we have this marvelous statement that has been running out ever since this dispute started, where it's all about mostly women and children when it comes to casualties. And that has been somewhat debunked on more than one occasion. He also claimed that it was Israel's obligation to provide for the needs of the citizens of Gaza under the Geneva Convention, referring to the International Agreement for the Protection of Non-Combatants During Armed Conflict. Hamas has fired tens of thousands of rockets aimed at Israel's cities over the past 20 years in contravention of the same convention that they are quoting. And this is characteristic of the rhetoric of these individuals. How could you possibly take them seriously? And to top it all off, Osama Hamdan, amazing. When the Western world is claiming that Israel is blocking aid and Israel is responsible for feeding the Palestinians and it's all their fault, they're the worst, most wicked people in the whole world, we have this man saying, we expect our great people to thwart the method of receiving aid today, just as they thwarted it yesterday. We trust that our people will endure hunger and not extend their hands to the occupier asking for aid. That's why the people are not being fed. The Hamas fighters are stopping them from getting fed. Now, things have changed a little bit in recent weeks, for sure. But yet we're still hearing this rhetoric that it's all Israel's fault. And yet we're seeing these ads of people creating movies, children being trained up to cry and carry on, and children in the background laughing as these little video clips are being made. I don't have the slightest doubt there are people genuinely hungry in Palestine. They're serving a purpose. Their purpose is to draw attention to the fact that they're being starved by Israel. Well, there's obviously thousands of other people who have access to food and are being fed and are doing very nicely. Thank you very much. But it always comes back to Israel's fault. I don't think Israel will exist 10 years from now. Liberation requires a very large war with Israel. No cost is too high for Palestine, Jerusalem, Alaska, Mosque, the people who are sacrificed or accepted by Allah as martyrs. Do you sound like someone who's going to genuinely accept a two-state solution? And of course, we have these accusations and these rehearsed movies of the starvation that's been happening there. And yet, look at this, a menswear store in Gaza, and you can find this on the internet. This hasn't been made up. Despite the starvation, despite all the suffering of the Palestinian people, there are some people with money, the shops are open, they're doing business, and here is one of their menswear stores, Hitler for menswear. I won't go into this in detail now, but you have this accusation about movies being made to simulate the terrible conditions that are supposed to be taking place in all of Palestine. And around the world, of course, we have people coming out in protest on behalf of the Palestinians, on behalf of terrorism. In Australia, people actually denouncing their own country. I mean, for what end? What has Australia done? What is it supposed to do? They want to annihilate Australia, holding up pictures of the Ayatollah. We have Iranians living in our country. How do you think they feel when they see the man from whom they fled, the man who killed their relatives, the man who is still murdering their relatives at every opportunity? When terrorist flags and symbolisms are being waved from the Harbour Bridge and the Australian flag is being burnt. I mean, and yet this is acted out all over the world. And here we have Soran Mandami, the heir apparent to the throne of the Lord Mayor of New York, his senior advisor posing proudly next to a swastika. And again, a picture in Sydney. We're kind of pretty familiar with some of these things. In the interest of time, I'm going to keep going. But no other war in history of all wars was under such an international microscope of what's going on in Israel today. No other army had to behave so courteously towards its worst enemy. No other hostage from any terrorist attack was more ignored by public opinion. No other country was even more hated, ever more hated and questioned for defending itself, and no other nation had to feed the criminals who murdered and kidnapped their own. Which brings us then to the main terrorists we want to talk about. And I think we might leave it there for the moment and take a break and come back and continue in just a little while.
The channel grow. Drop a comment in the comment section and let us know what you thought. And make sure you subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a new upload. Please share it and spread the word. Thanks for watching, and remember to come back soon.